Veni Creator Spiritus, manifestor visita, imple superna gratia, que tu creasti pectora.
On the Principles of Nature, chapters 3 through 5, an explanation of the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. Before going into detail, let's discuss the broad topics covered in chapters 3 through 5 of On the Principles of Nature. The most important topic is the four causes. Aristotle developed the doctrine that there are four kinds of cause. This is perhaps the most important doctrine that Aristotle developed, and St. Thomas Aquinas accepts it and uses it throughout his works. Aquinas will also discuss the distinction between the words principle, cause, and element. He will also discuss the priority among the four causes, or in other words, which of the four causes is first with respect to causality. He will also discuss the distinction between absolute and conditional necessity. He will also divide the notion of cause in several ways. First, into proximate and remote causes. Second, into per se and per accidens causes. And finally, into actual and potential causes. Or in other words, causes in act and causes in potency. In On the Principles of Nature, chapters 1 through 2, St. Thomas said that there were three principles of nature: matter, form, and privation. Now, these were principles of nature in the sense in which nature is taken as an internal principle of motion or rest. These three internal principles of motion do not sufficiently explain motion. We need external principles as well. That's where we get the doctrine of the four causes. Matter cannot reduce itself from potency to act. Form is only at the end of a process of motion from potency to act. Thus, it cannot explain the origin of the process itself. Finally, privation is only a per accidens principle of motion. Thus, if we're going to look at all of the per se principles of motion, or causes, we need more than just matter and form. So this is why we have four causes. The four causes begin with matter, or the material cause. This is the internal principle from which a thing is. And the formal cause, or form, which is the internal principle by which a thing is in act. But besides these two causes, we also have two other causes which are not principles of nature. These are the agent cause, which can also be called the efficient or moving cause, and the final cause, which can also be called the end, goal, or purpose. The agent cause is the external principle by which a thing is in act. Notice that this differs from the formal cause in the sense that the agent cause is an external principle by which a thing is in act, whereas the formal cause is an internal principle by which a thing is in act. The final cause is that for the sake of which something is or comes to be. To understand these four causes, let's analyze a few objects in terms of them. We'll begin with the pietà. This is an artificial object, or artifact. That means it was made by humans. The material cause of this statue is its marble. The formal cause is the shape of Mary and Jesus in the statue. This formal cause is an accident, namely an accident in the category quality. The reason it's in the category quality is because it's a shape. Neither the material cause nor the formal cause sufficiently explains this statue. The material cause didn't spontaneously acquire its statue shape. It's not as if marble suddenly or accidentally became something that was shaped like Jesus and Mary. The formal cause also doesn't explain the statue, because the formal cause only adhered in the marble at the end of the process of carving the marble, meaning there is something else that needs to explain the statue, because the formal cause only arrived at the end as the effect of the process of making the statue. Thus we need something else, an agent cause, or sculptor. In this case, the agent cause is Michelangelo, who sculpted the Pietà. But Michelangelo didn't act without reason. He acted precisely because he had some final cause motivating him to act. He had some end or goal. The final cause in this case was to provoke pity for Jesus and Mary. This final cause moved Michelangelo to sculpt the statue. Thereby, he put the shape of the statue into the marble. Besides analyzing artificial objects or artifacts, we can also analyze natural objects. Natural objects differ from artificial objects in the sense that they have an internal principle of motion. In this case, we'll take for our example of a natural object, an oak tree. Its material cause is wood. Its formal cause is its soul. Here by soul, we just mean the first principle of life in the tree, whatever that first principle happens to be. The agent cause, or what produced the tree, is some other tree that acted by means of a procreative process. Some other tree that made this tree by means of producing an acorn. The final end or final cause, that is, the goal or purpose for which that other tree acted in producing this tree, was to produce another tree like itself, that is, another oak tree. We can also analyze something like an asteroid in gravitational freefall in terms of its four causes. Here, since we're dealing with an accidental change in the asteroid, the material cause will be the asteroid itself. The formal cause must be in one of the 9 accidental categories. In this case, it's going to be in the category place or where. That is, the place of the asteroid. The agent cause will be whatever made the asteroid to be a heavy object, that is, something that moves towards the center of gravity. The final cause, or goal, is the center of gravity. That is what is intended by the asteroid in its gravitational freefall. The final cause is always what is intended by a motion or by a thing. But intention, obviously, does not necessarily imply knowledge or consciousness of the end intended. Clearly, asteroids don't know what they intend, and trees don't know what they intend. Here's an example of something that does know what it intends. A man going to a grocery store is conscious of his final cause in that motion, namely to buy milk. On the other hand, a rock that's falling to the center of gravity is not conscious of the final cause for which it acts. Consider the following circle that includes all things that intend their end. This circle will include such things as atoms, trees, rocks, chemical compounds, statues, computers, dogs, lions, and humans. All of these things intend some end. Nevertheless, there's only a subsection of these things that has knowledge or consciousness of the end that it intends. For instance, dogs, lions, and humans know what they are intending, whereas the other things that intend an end have no consciousness of what they intend. There are 2 kinds of final cause or end. There is the end of generation, or finis generationis, and there is the end of the thing generated, or in Latin, finis rei generate. the end of generation is a form. For example, the form of a tree is its soul, and the form of a statue is its shape. The end of generation is always numerically the same as the formal cause in a thing. So, for instance, the end of the tree in producing another tree is the form of that other tree. So, the form of that other tree is both formal cause and final cause of generation, or finis generationis. The end of generation is also specifically the same as the form of the agent or efficient cause. So, whereas the form of the tree that has been generated is numerically the same as the final cause of its process of being generated, it's only specifically the same, or alike to, the form of the thing that causes its generation. So, the second oak tree has a certain form, that is, its formal cause. This formal cause is numerically the same as the end or final cause for which the other tree acted. It's also specifically the same, or of the same species as, the form of the tree that produced the second tree. The end of the thing generated is never a form, but instead an operation or activity. For instance, the end of a human is happiness, and the end of the pietà, that is, its end as a thing generated, is to provoke pity. What should be clear from this distinction between the end of generation and the end of the thing generated is that if we are talking about the end of generation when we say final cause, then sometimes the final cause, the formal cause, and the efficient cause will be the same as one another. If we're talking about the end of generation, the formal cause and the final cause will be numerically the same, and these two will be specifically the same, or the same in species, as the form of the efficient cause. If we're talking about the end of the thing generated, on the other hand, formal cause, final cause, and efficient cause are not the same as one another. Now let's talk about the difference between the words cause, principle, and element. These are three very important terms specifically in natural science or natural philosophy. A principle is what is first in a certain order. A cause is a kind of principle from which existence, or esse, follows. Here, esse is a Latin technical term meaning roughly existence or being. An element is a material cause of a certain kind. Particularly, it's a material cause that is primary in the thing caused, and which is not divided by form, that is, which is homogeneous. Let's think a little more closely about what these three parts of the definition of element mean. An element is a material cause that is primary because it's not a material cause that is composed of more basic matter. For instance, flesh and bones are composed of more basic matter, such as cells. Thus, flesh and bones are clearly not elements. Secondly, an element is something that is in the thing caused. This is put in the definition of element because element is not matter in the sense that includes privation, that is, matter which no longer exists in the thing generated. For instance, sperm and egg are said to be the matter of a human, but they cannot be the elements of a human because they don't actually exist once the human himself exists. Bread is the matter of blood, but bread is not the element of blood because blood is made out of bread by the corruption and digestion of bread. In order for bread to become blood, bread must lose its form. Likewise, flour is the matter of bread, but it is not an element of bread, because flour is destroyed in the process of making bread out of flour. So an element is a material cause that is both primary and remains in the thing caused, unlike bread with respect to blood, and unlike flour with respect to bread, and unlike sperm and egg with respect to humans. The third element in the definition of element is that elements must be a material cause which is not divided by form, that is, which is homogeneous. For instance, flesh and bone are the material cause of a human, but they are not elements of a human because they are not homogeneous, but differ from one another in form. Something homogeneous is alike in all of its parts. Let's consider the relationship between the technical terms principle, cause, and element. A principle can be considered as the broadest of these terms. It includes matter, form, agent, end, and privation. Among these principles, only the first four are causes. That is, only the per se principles are causes. Form, agent, matter, and end are all causes. And among the causes, only a certain kind of matter or material cause is considered an element. Not even all material causes are elements, as we've just seen, but only some. One of the greatest challenges in the history of science for thousands of years has been to discover what are the elements of natural things. Aristotle and Aquinas mistakenly believed that there were four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Earth was the element that naturally moved down, that is, towards the center of the earth. Fire was the element that naturally moved upwards, that is, towards the heavens. Water and air were viewed as intermediate elements between earth and fire. All four elements were viewed as homogeneous. Now, however, we know that water, air, and earth are composed of more basic matter. For instance, hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon atoms. Thus, these are not true elements. They don't meet Aristotle and Aquinas' definition of element, given what we know about them in modern science. Modern scientists, who originally constructed the periodic table of elements, mistakenly believed that the items on the periodic table were homogeneous spherical objects, not composed of anything more basic. In other words, they thought that the items they were putting onto the periodic table of elements met Aristotle's definition of an element. Now, however, we know that the things on the periodic table are composed of more basic matter, such as protons, neutrons, and electrons. Thus, the things on the periodic table are not true elements, despite the beliefs of the people who created the periodic table. So what are the true elements? What in the world does meet Aristotle's definition of an element? The simple answer is that at this point, we just don't know. Scientists are still working on discovering this. Besides enumerating the four causes, St. Thomas also explains the relationship between these four causes in terms of before and after, or put differently, prior and posterior. But prior, or before, can mean one of two things. Usually, this word means temporal priority, that is, priority with reference to time and generation. Sometimes, however, quite frequently indeed, prior means natural priority, that is, priority in reference to substance or completion and perfection. If we're talking about temporal priority, we either mean what's temporally prior in a given substance or subject, or we mean what's temporally prior simply speaking or absolutely, that is, temporally prior with reference to the whole universe. If we're looking at temporal priority within a given subject, potency or the imperfect will always precede act or the perfect. Matter will precede form, and the agent will precede the end that is brought into existence by the agent. So consider a tree. The acorn, which with reference to the mature tree is always potency and imperfect, will always precede the tree. The egg will precede the chicken. But if we're looking at temporal priority simply speaking, or for the whole universe, then act or perfect will precede potency or imperfect. Form will precede matter. In other words, some mature tree must always precede the acorn from which another tree is produced. Likewise, a chicken will always precede the egg by which another chicken is produced. So temporal priority is reversed depending on whether we're talking about temporal priority in a given subject or temporal priority simply speaking. Natural priority is similar to temporal priority simply speaking. For natural priority, act or the perfect precedes potency or the imperfect. Form precedes matter. The end precedes the agent. Even though the agent brings the end or final cause into existence, before he did so, the final cause was already making him to do so. In other words, the final cause's causality was operative prior to the agent bringing the end into existence. Thus, form is before matter, and the end is before the agent, in terms of natural priority. Following Aristotle, St. Thomas notes that something can be the cause and effect of the same thing in different respects. For instance, health is the final cause of walking, but walking is the efficient cause of health. Likewise, the body is the material cause of the soul, and the soul is the formal cause of the body. But when we consider how one cause relates to another, we must come to the conclusion that the final cause is the cause of causes. In other words, the final cause is absolutely prior to all the other causes in terms of causality. Consider the final cause to provoke pity. This motivates the agent cause, Michelangelo, to sculpt, that is, to become an agent cause. Without the final cause, he would just keep on being Michelangelo and never be a sculptor. So the final cause causes the causality of the agent cause. But then this agent cause causes the material cause to be the matter of the formal cause. The formal cause formally causes the material cause, and the material cause materially causes the formal cause. But the agent cause brings about the causality of both the material and the formal cause. So the final cause relates to all three causes as the cause of its causality. Each of the four causes has relevance for our understanding of necessity. Necessity in general is the absence of potency. For instance, if we say that death is necessary, we mean that there is no possibility or potency for living forever. Likewise, if we say that driving a car is necessary, we mean that one has no possibility of getting to work without a car. Absolute necessity which is also called natural necessity, is necessity proceeding from causes prior in generation or in time. That is, from the material cause and the efficient cause. Here's an example. It is necessary that every human dies because all humans are made out of corruptible matter. Notice the absolute necessity is following from the kind of material cause found in humans, namely corruptible matter. Here's another example. It is necessary that you give your money to the bank robber because he is forcing you to do so. Notice that the necessity here is absolute necessity because it proceeds from an efficient cause or agent cause, namely the bank robber. Besides absolute necessity, there is also conditional necessity. This can also be called hypothetical necessity. This is a necessity that proceeds from causes posterior in generation or in time, namely from the final cause and formal cause. For instance, if I want to commute to work from the suburbs, I need a car. Here, the necessity of me needing a car proceeds from the end or final cause, that of getting to work from the suburbs. St. Thomas's On the Principles of Nature, Chapter 5, concerns 3 different ways of distinguishing causes. The first of these is dividing causes into proximate and remote causes. The second is to divide causes into per accidens and per se causes. The third way is to divide causes into potential and actual causes. Besides these 3 ways of distinguishing causes, we will also discuss the distinction of causes into instrumental and principal causes. All 4 kinds of cause, namely material, formal, agent, and final, can be divided into proximate and remote varieties. Let's take examples from each of the 4 causes, starting with material cause or matter. Our first example can be that of the material cause of an animal. The subatomic particles of the animal are the most remote material causes of the animal. Atoms are less remote and more proximate. Chemical compounds are even less remote and even more proximate. From there we might move to organelles, then cells, then tissue, then organs. Organs are the most proximate matter out of which the animal is made, and the least remote cause. Let's also look at the material cause of the United States of America, or of a country. Families are the most remote material cause of the United States of America. Then we might move to neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are less remote and more proximate. Cities are even less remote and even more proximate. The states, that is, the 50 states that constitute the United States of America, are the most proximate cause of the United States of America. We could also look at the material cause of a word. Letters are a remote cause. Syllables are a proximate material cause. Now let's consider examples from efficient causes or agents. Great-grandparents are remote efficient causes of a child. Grandparents are less remote and more proximate. Parents are the proximate efficient causes of a child. Now let's look at the efficient causes of the President of the United States of America. The remote cause is U.S. citizens over 18. The proximate cause is the Electoral College. Finally, let's look at the efficient cause of nutrition in a carnivore. The proximate cause is some herbivore that is eaten by the carnivore. The less proximate cause and more remote cause is some photosynthesizing plant which was eaten by the herbivore, such that the herbivore itself had nutrition that the carnivore could take from it by eating it. The most remote cause is the sun. The sun causes some sort of energy in the photosynthesizing plant. Then that energy is communicated to the herbivore who eats the plant. And finally, the energy is communicated to the carnivore who eats the herbivore. So the sun is a remote cause and the herbivore is a proximate cause. Now that we've discussed proximate and remote material and efficient causes, let's look at final and formal causes with respect to proximity and remoteness. Let's start with final causes. Suppose I want to enjoy my coffee. Well, in order to do this, I must drink my coffee not black. In order to have that, I need to put milk in my coffee. But in order to put milk in my coffee, I must buy milk. In order to buy milk, I must drive to the grocery store. And to do that, I must start my car. And in order to start my car, I must grab keys from my basket. Here, we see that the remote end or the remote final cause is to enjoy my coffee. The proximate end is to grab keys from my basket. That's the most proximate thing I actually intend. Here's another example. Suppose I want to survive. Well, in order to survive as an adult, I must receive an income. And to receive an income, I must get a job. And in order to get a job, I must learn a skill. And in order to learn a skill, I must go to school. And in order to go to school, I must apply to a school. So the remote end in applying to a school is to survive. And the proximate end that I intend is to apply to a school. In general, the end is always what is remotely intended, and the means are what are proximately intended. Now let's look at proximate and remote formal causes. Let's consider the formal causes or natures of Plato. Most generally, or remotely, Plato is a substance. More specifically, or approximately, he's a body, that is, a bodily or corporeal substance. Even more specifically or approximately, he's an organism, that is, a living substance. Yet more proximately, we might say he's an animal. That's his proximate genus. Even more proximately, he's a human. That's his species. So his remote formal cause is the form by which he's a substance, and his proximate formal cause is the form considered as that by which he's a human. Now, St. Thomas Aquinas believes that the form by which someone is a substance is the same as the form by which someone is human. These are just more general or specific ways of considering the same form. Nevertheless, we could speak about substance as being the remote formal cause of Plato, and human being the proximate formal cause of Plato, even though these technically result from the same form. Now let's look at per se and per accidens causes. An essential cause, which is also called a per se cause, is a cause of a thing inasmuch as that thing is that thing. An accidental cause, or a per accidens cause, in contrast, is one that is an accident of an essential or per se cause. In other words, an accidental cause is something that happens to, or befalls, or occurs to an essential or per se cause. Here are some examples to make this more clear. When we say the builder builds, we are expressing a per se or essential cause. The builder is the per se cause of building. In contrast, if the builder happens to have the art of music, that is, he happens to be a musician, then if we say the musician builds, we're expressing an accidental cause. It is not as a musician or qua musician that a builder builds. Rather, he builds qua builder. Another essential cause is expressed when we say, the king governs the kingdom. This is in contrast to saying, the blind man governs the kingdom. Here, it is accidental to the king that the king happens to be blind. Being blind is something that occurs to, or happens to, or befalls the king. Thus, we can say the blind man governs the kingdom, but he does not govern the kingdom qua blind man, or as a blind man. He governs the kingdom insofar as he is a king. Here's a third example. The doctor heals the patient. It is essential to the nature of the doctor that he heal the patient. That is something that naturally results from being a doctor. In contrast, if we say the patient heals the doctor, because in this particular instance it happens to be the case that the one who is sick and in need of healing is the doctor himself, and the doctor heals himself, and thus it's technically true that the patient heals the doctor. Nevertheless, what we have expressed here is an accidental causality, not an essential or per se causality. When we say the doctor heals the patient, we express the per se order from cause to effect, whereas when we say the patient heals the doctor, describing a situation in which the doctor heals himself, we are expressing a per accidens cause. Events that are attributed to chance or fortune are the result of a per accidens cause. For instance, if we say that the farmer finds gold in his field, we are describing a per accidens causality. Here, what's actually happening is that there are two chains of per se causality which happen to overlap with one another. The farmer has gone out into his field in order to plow it. Likewise, the thief has buried gold in the field. These are two per se causalities which happen to overlap with one another, and thus they result in a chance or fortuitous event, namely the farmer finding the thief's gold in the field. Here's another example. Lightning strikes this tree. This is a chance event because there is nothing about lightning or about this tree which entails that the lightning will strike this particular tree. St. Thomas also divides causes into potential and actual causes. An actual cause, or a cause in act, is simultaneous with its effect. A potential cause, or a cause in potency, is not simultaneous with its effect. Let's consider some examples. The builder builds during exactly the same time that the building is being built. Thus, the builder actively building is a cause in act. In contrast, while the builder is on vacation, the builder is a cause of building, but he's only a cause in potency. He's not actually building. Likewise, the jester entertains during exactly the same time that the audience is being entertained. Thus, the jester here is a cause in act. In contrast, while the jester is silently philosophizing in his room, the jester is a cause of entertainment only in potency, not in act. In works other than On the Principles of Nature, St. Thomas makes much of Aristotle's distinction between instrumental and principal causes. The principal cause is the cause that is like what is produced. In other words, it bears a similarity to what it produces. The instrumental cause is not like what it produces. Rather, the instrumental cause is that by which the principal cause brings about its effect. For instance, one tree is the principal cause of the other tree. Both trees are alike each other. They are the same in species. The instrumental cause by which a tree is produced is the acorn. This is not like what is produced. Rather, it is that by which the thing is produced. Here's another example. Michelangelo is the principal cause of the statue called the Pietà. Although he, in his external form, does not resemble the statue, he does have a likeness to the statue in his mind. He uses this idea of the statue, the likeness to the statue, in order to produce the statue. The instrumental cause by which Michelangelo works is his hammer and chisel. This hammer and chisel itself bears absolutely no resemblance to the statue. Moreover, it does not have a likeness of the statue in its mind, since the hammer and chisel do not have a mind. They can't have a likeness of the statue in them.
Donum Dei alti